The desperate cry, 5 to 7 minute hook. In the cold vastness of space, far beyond the reach of most civilizations, a single planet glowed faintly. It was called Vrelk Prime, home to a peaceful and intelligent species, the Vrelk. The Vrelk had never known war. Their society was built on cooperation and understanding. But now, their peaceful world was under attack by an unstoppable force. A ruthless alien empire, known as the Karvuk Legion, had set its sights on Vrelk Prime, and their armies were marching closer every day. The Vrelk had tried everything. They sent diplomats to beg for peace. They sent envoys to offer trade. But the Karvuk were not interested in peace or trade. They only sought to conquer and destroy. Their weapons were unlike anything the Vrelk had ever seen. Entire cities were wiped out in a single night. The Vrelk watched as their world slowly crumbled, and they realized the truth. They could not survive this alone. In their desperation, the Vrelk turned to the stars. They knew there were others out there, beings who might understand their plight and come to their aid. But the Vrelk were not naive. They knew that no one would help them unless they were desperate enough to do so. And so, in their darkest hour, they sent out a message into the cosmos, a message that would carry their plea to the farthest reaches of space. Please, anyone who can hear us, help us. The message echoed across the stars. Our people are dying. Our world is falling. We need heroes, and we need them now. The message was simple, but it was filled with fear and desperation. It spoke of their cities burning, of families being torn apart, of the hopelessness that had settled into the hearts of the Vrelk people. The message begged for help, not from just any race, but from those with the strength and the will to fight back against the Karvuk. The Vrelk were asking for heroes, someone who could challenge the Karvuk Legion and save their people. The message traveled across the stars, weaving through the dark silence of space, until it reached a planet many light years away. Earth. Earth, a young and thriving world, home to a species that had been hardened by centuries of war and conflict. The people of Earth had fought for their survival on a world that was hostile, dangerous, and full of threats. They had survived wars, natural disasters, and alien invasions. They were no strangers to fighting for their survival. When the Vrelk's cry for help reached Earth, it was not met with indifference. Earth's leaders understood the weight of the message. The Vrelk had asked for heroes, and Earth knew that they could be the ones to answer. But there was more to the message than just a call for help. It was a challenge. A challenge to those who called themselves strong. A challenge to those who thought they could save a dying world. On Earth, the message was intercepted by a group that had been waiting for a call like this. The Deathworlders, humans who had grown up on Earth's harshest and most dangerous environments, were the warriors of Earth. They were the strongest of the strong, trained to survive in the most unforgiving conditions. They were the ones who had faced the worst of what the universe had to offer and had come out on top. Commander Ken, the leader of the Deathworlders, stood before a large holographic display in the command center, his eyes fixed on the flickering message. He felt a surge of adrenaline rush through him as he read the words. It was a cry for help, but it was more than that. It was a call for action. The Vrelk are on the brink, Ken muttered to himself. They need help. They need heroes. He turned to his crew, his voice low but filled with resolve. Prepare the fleet. We're going to answer their call. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. The Deathworlders knew what this meant. They had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. The Karvuk Legion was a force to be reckoned with. The Vrelk might be peaceful, but the Deathworlders were warriors, and they were ready to fight. Let's show them what it means to call for help, Ken said, his eyes burning with determination. Prepare for battle. We leave in 1 hour. The Vrelk had called for help, and the Deathworlders had heard their cry. Now it was time to answer. As the crew scrambled to prepare for the mission, Ken could only think of one thing. The universe was about to witness the fury of the Deathworlders. The march of the Deathworlders. The countdown had begun. The fleet of Deathworlders was ready to depart. In the command center, Commander Khan stood with his arms folded, staring at the star map before him. Each bright dot on the map represented a fleet of ships, all preparing to launch. Each ship carried soldiers, engineers, strategists, and experts, ready to face whatever the Karvuk Legion threw at them. The Vrelk had asked for heroes, and now they would receive them. The Deathworlder fleet was vast, hundreds of ships, each one an indomitable force in its own right. The ships were built for combat, capable of withstanding harsh environments and hostile terrain. They were designed to be fast, deadly, and efficient. Everything about the Deathworlders spoke of strength, power, and resilience. This was their domain, and no enemy could stand against them for long. As the fleet prepared to leave Earth's orbit, Commander Khan addressed his crew. His voice rang out, steady and unwavering. "We are heading into the heart of enemy territory. We don't know what the Karvuk Legion has in store for us, but I do know one thing. We fight for those who can't fight for themselves. The Vrelk may not know war, but we do. We'll show them how it's done." The crew of the Deathworlders nodded, their faces set in grim determination. These were not just soldiers. They were survivors, warriors who had fought in the harshest conditions imaginable. Earth had forged them into unyielding weapons, and now they would turn that might towards saving another world. As the fleet jumped into hyperspace, Commander Khan couldn't shake the thought of the Vrelk. They were peaceful beings, caught in the middle of a war they never asked for, and now their only hope lay in the hands of the Deathworlders, beings who understood war, destruction, and survival better than anyone. The Karvuk Legion would not know what hit them. The journey through hyperspace was long, but it gave Khan and his crew time to prepare mentally. Every soldier on the ship was trained for what was coming, but even the Deathworlders couldn't prepare for the scale of what they were about to face. The Karvuk Legion was a force of immense power, far more than anything they had faced before. But Khan knew his people. He trusted them to do what they did best. "Sir," said Lieutenant Saren, the ship's tactical officer, her voice breaking the silence, "we're approaching Vrelk Prime. The Karvuk are already here. They've begun their assault." Kane turned toward her, his jaw tightening. The Vrelk had only sent the distress signal days ago, and the Karvuk had already launched a full-scale invasion. There was no time to waste. "All ships, prepare for immediate entry into the atmosphere," Khan ordered. "We need to hit them fast and hard. No mercy." The fleet descended toward the surface of Vrelk Prime, the ships cutting through the sky like thunderbolts. The sight was awe-inspiring. Hundreds of ships, their dark forms blocking out the stars, descending like a storm on a helpless world. The Vrelk cities were already burning. From orbit, Khan could see the devastation. Plumes of smoke rose from the shattered remains of the Vrelk capital, and flashes of bright light illuminated the horizon as Karvuk ships laid waste to everything in their path. "Target their command center," Khan ordered as the first Deathworlder ships broke through the clouds and approached the surface. "We need to cripple their leadership if we want to stop this invasion." The fleet split into smaller groups, each one assigned a specific target. The Deathworlders moved with precision, their ships swooping down on Karvuk positions and delivering devastating strikes. Laser fire, missiles, and energy beams filled the air as Deathworlders and Karvuk clashed. On the ground, Vrelk soldiers watched in disbelief as the Deathworlders stormed the battlefield. These were not the peaceful warriors they had imagined. The Deathworlders fought like the storms they came from, relentless and powerful. Their ships shook the earth with their sheer presence. "Hold the line," a Deathworlder commander shouted as his squad advanced through enemy territory. They had no fear. They had no doubt. The Vrelk had asked for heroes, and they would deliver. Commander Khan's voice echoed through the comms, steady and commanding. "This is not just about saving Vrelk Prime. This is about sending a message. The Karvuk Legion will know that no one, no matter how powerful, can just take what they want. Not on our watch." As the battle raged, The Deathworlders were unstoppable. They had only just begun their assault, and already the Karvok Legion was reeling. The tide was turning, but there was still much to be done. The Vrelk needed to be freed, their world reclaimed from the invaders, and the Deathworlders would not stop until it was done. The cry for help had been answered, but this was only the beginning. The Deathworlders had unleashed their fury, and the Karvok were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. The unstoppable force. The battle was far from over. As the Deathworlder fleet continued its assault, the sound of explosions and the crackle of laser fire filled the air. The Karvok Legion had underestimated their opponents, but now they were beginning to understand the true meaning of power. The Deathworlders weren't just a force. They were a storm, a fury that couldn't be stopped. Commander Khan's voice was unwavering as he gave orders to his fleet. Keep pushing forward. No retreat. We're not leaving until this world is free. His words were echoed across the battlefield. The Deathworlders were relentless, each one of them a weapon in its own right. They moved as one, a coordinated force that struck like a lightning bolt. Their tactics were brutal but effective. They didn't need fancy strategies or advanced technology to win. They had raw power, and they were using it to obliterate the Karvok Legion. On the ground, the Vrelk soldiers watched in awe as the Deathworlders tore through the enemy lines. The Karvok had been expecting a fierce battle, but they hadn't anticipated facing beings who fought with such ferocity and unyielding resolve. The Deathworlders were everywhere, on the ground, in the sky, striking from every angle. Lieutenant Siren, Khan's trusted tactical officer, called in over the comms. "Sir, we've secured the perimeter around the capital, but we got a major Karvok stronghold to the north. It's heavily fortified." Khan didn't hesitate. "We'll take it down. Gather the forces. This will end today." The Deathworlders surged forward, determined to finish what they started. They cut through Karvok defenses like a knife through butter. The Karvok Legion had no chance against them. Every time they tried to regroup, the Deathworlders were already there, crushing them underfoot. In the sky above, the Deathworlder ships continued their bombardment, raining destruction on Karvok positions. Every Deathworlder ship that landed on the planet seemed to bring more power to the battle. Each one was a testament to their strength, their ability to adapt and overcome. The Karvok Legion was being overwhelmed, and there was no escape. But the Deathworlders knew that their victory wasn't guaranteed. The Karvok Legion wasn't like any enemy they had faced before. They were ruthless, organized, and incredibly dangerous. And though the Deathworlders had the upper hand, they couldn't let their guard down. The fighting had reached its peak as Khan's forces advanced deeper into Karvok territory. The capital city of Vrelk Prime was within sight, but it was a fortress, heavily guarded and well defended. Every step forward was met with resistance, but Khan knew there was no turning back now. "We have to break their stronghold," Khan said through clenched teeth, "no matter the cost." For the Vrelk, the battle had now become a race to take the capital, to end the war before the Karvok could regroup and launch a counterattack. The Deathworlders were closing in, their forces surrounding the city from all sides, and with each passing minute, the Karvok Legion's grip on the world began to slip. Meanwhile, the Vrelk soldiers, who had once cowered in fear, were now standing tall, fighting alongside their new allies. The Deathworlders had shown them the true meaning of bravery, the true meaning of strength. They had come to save them, to give them hope. And the Vrelk would fight until the very end to repay that debt. The battle was nearing its climax. The Deathworlders had fought their way to the heart of the Karvok stronghold. The time had come for a final push, a last-ditch effort to end the war once and for all. And the Deathworlders would not back down. Commander Khan's voice boomed across the comms. "This is it. We break them now. Give everything you've got, and let's show the Karvok that no one, not even them, can stand against the fury of the Deathworlders." As the soldiers of the Deathworlder fleet prepared for the final assault on the Karvok stronghold, the tension in the air was palpable. The battle had raged for hours, but now the Deathworlders were about to deliver the finishing blow. The Karvuk Legion would never know what hit them, and the universe would know that when the Vrok called for help, it was the Deathworlders who answered with fury and power. The final push. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The Deathworlder fleet, now reinforced by the relentless determination of their soldiers, was positioned at the gates of the Karvuk stronghold. Commander Khan stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes scanning the chaos unfolding below. He had seen many battles, but this was the culmination of everything they had fought for. The Karvuk had fortified their last stand with everything they had, but the Deathworlders were undeterred. The fight had already gone on for hours, with both sides giving everything they had. Now it was the final act, and the tension in the air was almost unbearable. This was the moment the Vrok had been waiting for, liberation from an oppressor that had terrorized them for generations. "We break them now," Khan said with steely resolve. "This ends today." On the ground, the Deathworlder forces were amassing, preparing for their final assault on the heart of the Karvuk defenses. The capital, Vrok Prime, lay just beyond the horizon. The soldiers had no time to waste, knowing that the Karvuk would fight tooth and nail to hold their ground. But the Deathworlders were ready. Lieutenant Siren's voice crackled through the comms. "Sir, we've got a clear shot at their main bunker. We've neutralized most of their forward positions. The Karvuk stronghold is still tough, but we're in the home stretch." Khan's grip tightened on the controls. "Push forward, all units. This is the final push. No retreat." The Deathworlders surged ahead, their footsteps shaking the ground beneath them. There was no hesitation, no second thoughts. They had come to finish this war, and they would do it in one decisive moment. The streets of Vrok Prime were littered with the wreckage of battle, but the enemy was beginning to falter. The Karvuk soldiers, once so confident in their overwhelming strength, now found themselves on the defensive. They had expected the Deathworlders to tire, to make mistakes, but the Deathworlders had not wavered. With each step, they showed no fear. With every strike, they showed no mercy. In the sky above, the Deathworlder ships rained down fire on Karvuk defenses. Explosions erupted as the ships delivered precision strikes to weaken the enemy's fortifications. Their tactics were as simple as they were effective: overpower and destroy. They had no time for subtlety. They had no time for diplomacy. The war was ending today. On the ground, Khan and his soldiers pushed through the streets of Vrok Prime, advancing toward the heart of the stronghold. The Karvuk resistance had stiffened, but their efforts were futile. The Deathworlders were too numerous, too strong, too furious to be stopped. "One more push," Khan muttered to himself, "and we're done." His voice was cold, but there was no mistaking the pride that accompanied it. The Deathworlders had done what others would have thought impossible. They had answered the call. They had delivered on the promise of salvation. But the battle was not yet won. There was still the matter of the Karvuk leader. The Karvuk had been ruthless throughout the war, and Khan knew that if the leader was not taken down, they could rally and cause even more destruction. This had to end here. "Siren," Khan said, speaking into the comms once more. "Prepare a team for a direct assault on their command center. We end this now." Siren responded with a confident tone. "Understood, sir. We'll be in position shortly." The final charge was underway. The Deathworlders pushed toward the main command center, and the Karvuk resistance grew desperate. The city was on the verge of collapse. The Vrok had waited for this moment for so long, and now, at last, they could see the light at the end of the tunnel. They could taste victory. As the Deathworlders closed in on the Karvuk command center, the remaining Karvuk forces made their final stand. They were determined to hold on to their last stronghold, but it was no use. The Deathworlders moved like an unstoppable wave, crashing through the enemy's last defenses. And then, with a deafening roar, the Deathworlders breached the walls of the command center. The battle had reached its zenith. The Karvuk leader stood at the heart of the complex, surrounded by his elite guards, but even they could not stop the might of the Deathworlder fleet. The end was near. With their final strike, the Deathworlders would leave the Charvok shattered, broken, and defeated. The universe would soon know the price of underestimating the wrath of the Deathworlders, and the unyielding spirit of the beings who had come to answer a desperate call for help. The shattered empire. The battle's conclusion was inevitable. As the Deathworlder fleet continued to decimate the Karvok strongholds, the oppressive grip of the Karvok Empire began to crumble. Across the battlefield, the Karvok soldiers' once proud defenses faltered under the relentless might of the Deathworlders. It was a sight of destruction, of finality. The Karvok Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for so long, was on the brink of collapse. Their leadership, their fortifications, their arrogance, it was all being torn apart. Commander Khan stood at the front lines, watching as the Karvok defenses crumbled like a sandcastle in the face of an unstoppable tide. The Deathworlders had proven their might. They had proven that no empire, no matter how strong, could withstand the fury of a species that had lived through and conquered the harshest of worlds. A burst of static interrupted Khan's thoughts, and the voice of Lieutenant Surin came through the comms. "Sir, the Karvok leader has been located. It's time to bring this war to a close." Khan's eyes hardened. The Karvok leader, the one who had commanded the oppression and bloodshed, was still alive. But not for long. It was time to end the Karvok Empire's reign. "Proceed with the final assault," Khan ordered. "We end this today." On the ground, the Deathworlder forces began their final march toward the heart of the Karvok Empire. They moved as a unified force, every soldier knowing their role, every weapon ready for the last push. They were a force of nature, a storm that would not be stopped. The Karvok had been a scourge on the galaxy, but now they would feel the weight of the Deathworlders' wrath. As the Deathworlders reached the command center, the Karvok leader stood surrounded by his elite guard, his face a mask of defiance. He was a towering figure, known for his ruthlessness and tactical genius. He had spent years building the Karvok Empire into a force that dominated the galaxy. But now it was his empire that would fall. The Deathworlders didn't hesitate. They stormed the command center, cutting down any who dared stand in their way. The Karvok guards fought fiercely, but it was clear they were no match for the sheer power and precision of the Deathworlders. Khan led the charge, his eyes locked on the Karvok leader as they closed the distance. The Karvok leader, realizing that the battle was lost, bellowed out a final command to his soldiers, but it was too late. The Deathworlders were upon them. In a swift motion, Khan and his team overwhelmed the leader's guards, taking them down with brutal efficiency. Now, only the Karvok leader remained, his back against the wall. Khan stood before him, the weight of his mission hanging in the air. The Karvok leader, once so powerful, now looked small, vulnerable, and defeated. He knew his empire was over. He knew that his days of terrorizing the galaxy were finished. "You fought hard," Khan said coldly, "but not hard enough." The Karvok leader scowled but said nothing. He had no words left. His empire, his legacy, was destroyed. The Deathworlders had come to deliver justice, and now the final blow was about to land. Khan raised his weapon, and with one final strike, the Karvok leader was no more. His reign was over. The Deathworlders had done what no one else could. They had brought down the Karvok Empire. Outside the command center, the rest of the Deathworlder forces had claimed victory. The Karvok strongholds had fallen, their capital in ruins. The galaxy would never forget the day when the Deathworlders came and answered the call for help. They had unleashed their fury, and now the Karvok were nothing but a memory, a cautionary tale of what happens when one empire dares to oppress those who will not be oppressed. The battle was over, but the work wasn't done. The Deathworlders began the difficult task of rebuilding, helping those who had suffered under the Karvok's rule. It wasn't enough to simply destroy an empire. They would help the galaxy heal. As Khan surveyed the battlefield, he felt the weight of their victory. The universe would remember the day when the Deathworlders rose up, unleashed their fury, and changed the fate of countless civilizations. The Karvok were gone, but the memory of their destruction would echo through the stars, a reminder that no tyrant, no matter how powerful, would ever escape the vengeance of the Deathworlders. And as the dust settled over the fallen empire, one thing was certain. The universe would never forget the day the Deathworlders answered the call. The aftermath of fury. The galaxy was left in stunned silence. The Karvok Empire, which had once terrorized countless star systems, was no more. Its towering cities lay in ruins, its fleets shattered, and its leader defeated. The Deathworlder fleet had delivered on their promise, wiping out the Karvok and bringing an end to their reign of terror. But the cost of this victory, though immense, was just beginning to unfold. The Deathworlders stood victorious, but the gravity of their actions was undeniable. As Khan surveyed the shattered remnants of the Karvok Empire, his heart was heavy. The cries of the oppressed still echoed in his mind, and while he knew their enemies had been vanquished, there was no true joy in the destruction left behind. Around him, his soldiers moved with purpose. They weren't just there to win a battle. They were there to rebuild, to ensure that the suffering that had endured for so long would never return. In the wreckage of the Karvok cities, Deathworlder engineers began working with the broken people, offering not only their strength but their wisdom. The universe, though forever changed by the Karvok's fall, now had a chance to heal, piece by piece. But the true cost of this war, Khan knew, would take time to measure. The Deathworlders had never waged such a large-scale war before. They were survivors, but now they were the galaxy's guardians, and their actions would reverberate through every corner of space. Some would see them as heroes, others as conquerors. But Khan and his fleet knew the truth. They had responded to a desperate cry for help, and they had taken action. Their fury had burned bright, but now it was their responsibility to ensure that peace followed in its wake. In the days that followed, the Deathworlders moved quickly. Their presence was no longer just a symbol of power but of hope. They visited the war-torn colonies once ruled by the Karvok, bringing aid, stability, and peace to those who had long suffered. They worked side by side with the native populations, rebuilding cities, repairing infrastructure, and bringing new life to a galaxy that had been on the brink of collapse. Khan spent hours talking to the leaders of these shattered worlds, listening to their stories, and offering a hand of friendship. He had come to realize that true power was not in destruction, but in the ability to rebuild, to protect, and to guide those who were lost. His soldiers, once known only for their might, were now known for their ability to heal. They had not only ended a war, they had opened the doors to a new era of cooperation and peace. Yet, as Khan looked out over the distant stars, he couldn't help but wonder if their actions would ever be fully understood. Would the galaxy see them as the saviors they were, or would they only remember the destruction, the fury, and the violence of their arrival? The Deathworlders had been fierce in their response, but the aftermath would determine the true legacy they left behind. Weeks later, a delegation from the surviving alien species arrived to meet with Khan. They had come to thank the Deathworlders for their courage, their strength, and their resolve. It was a symbol of the galaxy's respect, but also an acknowledgement of the sacrifices made. The Deathworlders had done more than simply answer a call. They had rewritten the rules of warfare and diplomacy in one fell swoop. They had turned the tide of an entire galaxy. But not everyone saw the Deathworlders as liberators. A faction of Karvok loyalists had escaped to the fringes of known space, organizing a resistance. The war had ended, but the universe was far from safe. Khan knew that there would always be those who refused to accept the new order. The Deathworlders had claimed victory, but the galaxy was still full of threats, both known and unknown. For now, Khan allowed himself a moment of peace. His soldiers had earned it, and the people they had saved needed it. But deep down, he knew the battle was far from over. The Deathworlders would need to stay vigilant. The universe had been forever changed by their fury, but now it was their responsibility to maintain that change, to protect the fragile peace they had created. As the sun set over the rebuilt cities, Can and his soldiers stood together, watching as the stars twinkled in the distance. They had won the war, but the true challenge was just beginning. The fate of the galaxy rested in their hands. A new dawn. The victory over the Karvuk Empire was not the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter in the galaxy's history. The Deathworlders had brought a fierce and unrelenting power to the battlefield, but now, their true test would be to ensure peace across a war-torn galaxy. Kun, their leader, had seen the devastation, the suffering, and the hope that had emerged from the ashes, and he knew that maintaining peace would be a far harder challenge than defeating their enemies. The galaxy had been forever changed. No longer would the Karvuk Empire cast its dark shadow across the stars. In its place, there was a fragile alliance of once oppressed worlds, now standing together in the face of uncertainty. But this unity was tenuous, and there were still those who had suffered greatly, those who felt that their freedom came at too high a price. Can stood in the heart of one of the newly rebuilt cities, looking out over the crowds of people who had come to witness the Deathworlders' arrival. The once distrustful alien species now saw them as protectors, but Can knew this perception could change in an instant. Heroes in one moment, enemies in the next. As the years passed, Can and his fleet continued their mission to secure peace. They met with leaders from across the galaxy, working tirelessly to maintain the fragile alliances they had forged. They sought to rebuild the civilizations that had been decimated by war, offering technology, resources, and support to those who had lost everything. But their work was far from over. While many of the liberated worlds celebrated the Deathworlders' intervention, there were whispers of unrest. Some felt that their sovereignty had been stolen, that the Deathworlders had imposed their own sense of order on worlds that had only just begun to heal. The galaxy was still divided, and new conflicts were brewing. Kane knew that, in the eyes of many, the Deathworlders had not only defeated an empire, they had become the new power in the galaxy. And with that power came the weight of responsibility. The Deathworlders were now the guardians of a galaxy that had been ravaged by war, and their every move would be watched by those who feared them and those who relied on them. One day, a new threat emerged, one that none had anticipated. A faction of Karvuk survivors, who had flowed into the uncharted regions of space, had begun to rebuild their strength. They had gathered a vast army, their fury now directed at the Deathworlders. The peace that had been so carefully constructed now hung in the balance. Can received word of this new threat while standing on the balcony of the rebuilt city. The stars above him were peaceful, but he knew that beneath that surface, a storm was gathering. He called his commanders together, gathering them in the war room to plan their next move. There was no time to waste. The Karvuk survivors would not wait for their enemies to come to them. "Prepare for war," Can said, his voice calm but resolute. The time for rebuilding was over. Now, the Deathworlders would have to fight once more, not for victory, but for survival. The galaxy had been forever changed by the actions of the Deathworlders. They had answered the call for help, and in doing so, they had taken on the mantle of protectors. But their greatest test had yet to come. The Karvuk were not finished, and neither were the enemies that would rise to challenge them. Kane looked out at the horizon once more. The battle for peace was far from over. But the Deathworlders had faced the impossible before, and they had emerged victorious. The galaxy would know their fury, but it would also know their resolve. The new dawn was not just the start of a new day. It was the beginning of a new era, one where the Deathworlders would rise to meet any challenge. And this time, they would not be alone. The universe had cried for help, and the Deathworlders had answered.